All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Andrea Miller. I'm the founding board member for Center for Common Ground, and I am so absolutely delighted that you are joining us tonight for our Accelerating Justice series. Tonight, we are going to be talking about another very, very important phase of achieving racial justice in the criminal justice system. And that topic, of course, will be the topic of policing. We have two North Carolina guests with us tonight. We have Mr. Kerwin Pittman and Mr. Tony Barnett. So Tony Burnett, the president of the NAACP in Virginia, is Barnett. So Tony Burnett, let me get that correct. So Center for Common Ground, we are a Virginia-based 501c3. So we are a nonpartisan organization, and we have a very simple mission. Our mission is to empower underrepresented voters to fully participate in democracy. And one of the challenges that we have with the criminal justice system is that in many instances, it is the criminal justice system that is preventing people from being able to participate in democracy. We run a number of campaigns here. The Reclaim Our Vote campaign, I know I've got many, many volunteers who are here from the Reclaim Our Vote campaign. We also run a larger, more overarching campaign, Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. We run the Vote Equality campaign, which sponsors the RVG, the Ruthless Vote Getter. And I'm going to have to get them on this slide. We have our internship campaign, which is Students for Justice. So in addition to being a voting rights justice organization, racial, healthcare, climate, economic, social, we are also a technology company, and we invent a lot of technology that we use for elections. Another sponsor tonight joining us are our dear friends from North Carolina at ampamerica.org. And we also tonight have another sponsor, the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a moment, and I am going to turn it over to Evelyn from AMP. So Evelyn, would you like to say hello to our audience, which is still growing? Evelyn, did I lose you? Well, Anna, I'm going to have to find Evelyn. I think I may have lost Evelyn. Anna, would you like to say hello to our guest?
Thank you, Andrea. Sure. Buenas noches. I'm Anna Ilarraza Blackburn. I am one of the tri-chairs from the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign. North Carolina is one out of over 40 states that have now been lifting up MLK's last campaign that he worked on before he was assassinated, which was the Poor People's Campaign. We are challenging systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, and the war economy. And of course, the distorted moral narrative. We work on a moral framework for addressing public policy. Now, due to the new administration, the Poor People's Campaign, and because of the COVID and the accelerated attacks on and fueling of racism, the Poor People's Campaign has been working on 14 policy priorities to heal the nation. One of those is number 7, protecting and expanding voting rights and civil rights, which goes right into what we will be discussing today, ensuring that the formerly and currently incarcerated have the right to vote. We are also working on and demanding policy and criminal justice reform based on the demands of grassroots organizations and for our communities, including in the campaign are those who egregiously are being impacted by police violence and mass incarceration and abuse of police power. Because we are focusing on the 140 million poor people that are being impacted through policy. So therefore, we welcome you. And on behalf of the Poor People's Campaign and the coordinating committee, thank you for joining us. And we welcome you to visit us on ppc-nc.org. And we are so proud and happy to be sponsoring this with AMP and Common Ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Evelyn Mabin Hall, say hello and give us greetings from AMP America.
Good evening. On behalf of ampamerica.org, Alliance of More Progressives, I welcome you to tonight's third Accelerating Justice webinar entitled Police Reform for Safer Communities. I'd just like to briefly say I received a text a couple of weeks ago from an AMP member and friend regarding a 6-year-old Black boy been arrested for picking a tulip from a neighbor's yard near his bus stop. My first reaction was, this must be a joke. But to my surprise, it was not. One article I read questioned if children who likely believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy should be making these significant life choices. Although I could not comprehend this as being a life choice, I read a statement which says the earlier you introduce a child to the criminal justice system, the higher the chances are they will remain in the criminal justice system. Currently, North Carolina has the lowest minimum age in the world to enter the juvenile justice system, 6 years of age. The US Department of Justice reports 2.2 million people are in our nation's jails and prisons, and another 4.5 million people are on probation or parole in the United States, totaling 6.8 million people. We are the world's leader in putting our people in jail. Most of the people inside are poor and Black. The article also listed 40 reasons why. Of course, I can't talk about 40, but 3 of them are discrimination, which can be walking, talking, driving, shopping, standing outside your home, or performing other accepted practices while being Black. Poverty. One can't afford an attorney or pay bail. The article states many poor people faced with misdemeanor charges never see a lawyer. And the last reason I will mention is prisons have become a very private business. Correction Company owns and runs 67 for-profit jails in 20 states. They, along with another company called GEO Group, have donated more than 10 million to candidates and have spent 25 million lobbying, according to the Washington Post. Governor Cooper's task force has his work cut out for them. The task force is currently in the process of addressing some of these issues, but the Center for Common Ground and its affiliated organization needs your help to ensure our system of inequality bends toward equality for all. The Center for Common Ground has changed the political dynamics in Virginia, Georgia, and other states. Andrea Miller, Center for Common Ground Executive Director, was honored along with Stacey Abrams as 2 of 8 Black women who helped flip Georgia. In 2020, Center for Common Ground contacted 14 million voters in 18 different states. These are only a few of their accomplishments. I wish to thank Andrea Miller, Susan Hutner, our brilliant North Carolina coordinator who is organized and always has a plan of action. Roxanne Rucker, who is assisting North Carolina and setting up one of the many statewide planned democracy centers. Nancy Goodman, an active volunteer who keeps us informed. And that I cut off, I was saying thank you for, we're proud to work with you and the Poor People's Campaign. I don't know, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Evelyn. And now we are getting ready to go for our first guest. One of the things I learned that was exceedingly disturbing back in 2013, it was a comment by then Virginia Senator James Webb. And he said, the United States has 5% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's prisoners. Either we are the most evil people on earth, or we over incarcerate people. I now want to take a moment and introduce our very first speaker, Mr. Kerwin Williams. Kerwin Pittman. Kerwin is on the North Carolina Task Force on Racial Equity and Criminal Justice. He's also director of Recidivism Reduction Educational Program Services. He's going to talk to us about this task force report, the recommendations on law enforcement reform, and he's going to give us ways that we can take action, even if we don't live in North Carolina. He is also going to share his experiences as a formerly incarcerated person who has become a community activist working for criminal justice reform. He is a national social justice advocate who advocates in the social justice field, particularly criminal justice, where he is a voice for the voiceless. Because if you can't vote, then you indeed have no voice. He is also an author who penned a book, Love Yours, a guide on how to love yourself. Kerwin, as I said, is also on the State Reentry Council Collaborative, and that was also created by North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper. Kerwin, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It is honestly my pleasure to be here. And I've never spoken to a crowd this large on Zoom. So it is a pleasure to be able to speak truth to power. So as she said, my name is Kerwin Pittman, social justice activist, particularly based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but kind of advocated on a few national issues, but highlight a lot of issues and injustices, particularly in North Carolina. And so what got me involved in criminal justice reform is because I myself was a victim to it, not only being a Black man in America, but I also experienced the plight of many Black men in America, and particularly in North Carolina, of going into the carceral system and dealing with the biases within the carceral system. So I also sit on the Governor's Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice reform, into which we rolled out 125 recommendations with sub recommendations under those 125, totaling over 225 recommendations that we're currently in the implementation phase of. And so I'm one of the guys that organized, and I got the governor's eye because I'm one of the guys that organized a lot of the protests in Raleigh. And so my mantra now is from protest to policy change, right? And so I realized that protest was just one way and one arm to bring about a means and awareness to injustices that are going on, but we must see it all the way through and make sure we're at the table when it comes to even lobbying for policy change and writing the policies and giving it to the lawmakers and say, I did all the hard lifting for you, here you go. And so I'm kind of in that phase right now, and though I do kind of help organize the organizers of protests, right now I'm focused on policy change and making concrete steps to make North Carolina essentially a more just place when it comes to racial inequities. And so I have a few of the task force recommendations that are some of my favorite. And like I said, it's 125 with 225 total sub recommendations. So I don't have the time to go through those, but if somebody could please, or I'll drop it in the chat after I speak, the link to the recommendations from the task force, that'd be great. So one of the recommendations that I particularly love is kind of like how we use the topic of reimagining public safety. And so you'll hear nowadays reimagining public safety, and really what does that mean? And it means this, honestly. The United States will train our law enforcement officers as soldiers. The training that they receive is really in combating soldiers mostly, right, for the most part. But we send them out to be social workers. I'm gonna say this again. The United States, we train our law enforcement officers as soldiers. but we send them out to be social workers. What do I mean by that? We send them out to be social workers because majority of the calls that they received, and I'm pretty sure this is across the country, are social related calls. It's nothing about really in itself going out and having to have a gun battle with a bad guy. Majority of our calls are dealing with individuals with mental health issues, individuals with substance abuse issues, homelessness, just social ills of the norm. And so one of the recommendations that I love, and I'm real passionate about, and I brought it forth to the task force, was kind of how we respond to different crises the individuals are going through. And those are one of the recommendations. And so we looked at different models around the country, particularly I studied them, from Cahoots to Eugene, Oregon, to STARS to Denver, Colorado, to where these individuals would do right. They have a special team of social workers to send out to individuals who are having a mental health crisis, right? So if somebody calls 911 and say, my brother is having a mental health crisis, law enforcement will not show up unless need be, and there's a violent tendency in it. But majority of these calls are not violent tendencies and become exacerbated when law enforcement shows up and the person having a crisis interface with law enforcement at this point. So what we say, okay, well, let's send a team of social workers out to handle this individual and kind of talk them down back to and out of this crisis. And kind of this is one of the recommendations that we put in place. And what would this recommendation take to implement and can be implemented across the states? Again, I looked at the models called Cahoots out of Eugene, Oregon, and STARS out of Denver, Colorado. This will take a conglomerate of different networks, not only from legislative for funding, but also on a state level, it could be taken through different administrative forms. What I mean by the Department of Health and Human Services within your particular area. In North Carolina, we call it Department of Health and Human Services. So these individuals can help with the trainings and different things of this nature to kind of help these individuals who are going through these crises. Another one of the recommendations that I so love is a mandatory consent to search. A mandatory written consent to search. This is extremely important. And I say this is extremely important because majority of individuals gateway 99% of the time, gateway into the criminal justice system is through the interface of law enforcement. Thus, this makes law enforcement the gatekeepers, essentially. These are the individuals, these are the gatekeepers who you have to see with this interface that will determine will you go into this system or not. So we know that drivers are stopped, particularly Black, at disproportionately higher rates. And where I'm from in North Carolina, we call it driving while Black. I don't know what you call in your part of the country, but where I'm from, we call it driving while Black. And so you'll be stopped as a Black male before any type of any other individuals are stopped around you, right? So we wanted to put in place a mandatory written consent to search, meaning that the individual who was stopped, they would have to give a written consent saying, I give you written consent. The officer would have to get this written permission from this individual to search their vehicle, meaning we will be able to track these officers, these road officers that say, I smell something in the car. I may need to search your car. I smell something in the vehicle. We will have a documentation and we will be able to see, well, 90% of your search, you say you smelled something. It may be something a little fishy. So we put this caveat in place to try to capture these rogue officers who are using the I smell something method. For individuals who are driving while Black just because they have a suspicion because you're driving while Black, or they just want to search your vehicle. So a written consent to search is one of the great things. A lot of the recommendations we put just under the heading of different use of force practices, tighten up on use of force practices. And so we actually put a prohibit on neck holds, ban neck choke holds. We put a prohibit on this. One of the recommendations, another one of the recommendations, we put a ban on hog tying subjects and really laying them on their stomach. Essentially, we put a ban on law enforcement retaliating against individuals for just talking back to these individuals. And so what will some of this take, right, to implement these type of recommendations, right, when it comes to use of force, but also a use of force database that collect these rogue officers' actions anytime there's some type of use of force. We begin to put in place a recommendation to create a database to capture these, but also for them to comply with the Department of Justice here in North Carolina. And it's a national database that a lot of officers and agencies are not even complying with. Why? Because they're not required to. And so we have something that is called the accreditation process. So if your law enforcement agency is not accredited, meaning it is not up to this standard, they can really do what they want to do. Now, granted, you might lose some funding because you're not accredited, but some of these smaller counties do not have the capacity to become accredited, nor the means to. And so this is kind of what we wanted to target, these small rural pockets, to where you may have these rural law enforcement rogue officers who just run the town because this is how it's been going for years. And so we wanted to capture some of these within the use of force policies. And so this is going to take a grave legislative push, though a lot of this can be implemented through local policies. And so I employ individuals to look at your local municipalities, the local police department policies, and kind of petition to do a ban on chokeholds, to do a ban on hog time, to actually create this database, look into this and push these local officials at your city council meetings, at your county commissioner meetings, or whatever it is in your area to look into these things, to implement these things in your particular area. Another recommendation that I'm extremely proud of and extremely sad, though, that this had to be implemented. And this particular one is requiring officers to have a first aid kit and to render aid, right? So why did I put this one in place, or why did I recommend this particular one? Because I've seen a lot of instances where law enforcement, and to be honest, they will shoot somebody or somebody will be hurt, but they will not render aid to them. They may call EMS after they make sure they're secured and handcuffed, but the individual will still be bleeding out on the ground, and they wouldn't even put their hand over their chest or wherever they shot to try to stop the blood. And this is just sad. This is extremely sad. You have the power to take someone's life, but you don't want to take the power to try to save someone's life. And so we made it mandatory. We did a recommendation to make it mandatory for an officer to render aid, especially when somebody's life is at stake. And that is going to take a legislative push, but most importantly, that could be done through a local agency push. So individuals in your area, your local agency can implement that particular policy right there. All you have to do is go to the chief of police, the sheriff's office, the county commissioners meetings, the mayor, the city council meetings, and ask for these changes and really get individuals behind you. And better yet, demand that these particular policies are put in place, because essentially you're saving someone's life. And another one that I'm going to get into, my last one of the recommendations, is the duty to intervene. And this right here could be implemented on a state level as well as a legislative level. So a lot of these recommendations, you can go to different in your local municipalities and demand that they implement these. And this is a duty to intervene, meaning if an officer see another rogue officer doing something to somebody, they have to intervene. It is nowhere, I'm going to stick to the thin blue line code and I'm not intervening. No, they have to intervene, or what, they get in trouble as well. And so you could push for that particular recommendation and demand within your city council and your different municipalities. Excuse me, one more, y'all. And this was one that was near and dear to my heart. The task force, we recommended to raise the age for juvenile jurisdiction to 12 years old. As the speaker said before me, it was a 6-year-old in North Carolina who actually had to go into court due to picking a flower out of a neighbor's yard. And that, I read the article as well, and it hurt my heart to the core to know that a kid was being entered into an adult system, modern day slavery, as I call it. And as Michelle Alexander so eloquently put in her book, The New Jim Crow. So what we did was put a recommendation to raise the age to 12. Right now, currently, there is a bill that was filed to raise the age to 10. And so we're kind of struggling with different caveats surrounding that, meaning that 11 and 12-year-old still have to go through different screenings to make sure that they're eligible to be able to partake in the process of going to court. But sadly to say, this is where we at, where North Carolina is really essentially hauling 6 years olds, one of the lowest in the country, that was said, into court, and it is extremely sad. And so that is my experience when it comes to reimagining public safety. And what reimagining public safety means for me from a personal experience means doing away with the system that is racially biased and racially motivated, that we know continuously plague our people, and as well as hurt a particular set of people, particularly Black and brown people, at a higher rate than anybody else. And we know this. We have the data to prove it. We have statistics. We have real experience. We have individuals dying and giving their lives because of this. So now we're at a point in our history. What are we going to do? what are we going to do? And so I implore everybody who is on this particular Zoom to please use your voice, lift your voice up, go to these city council meetings, go to the mayor, go to the county commissioner meetings, go to the chief of police, and demand these type of reforms in place, because you essentially could be saving and will save someone's life from a system that was really birthed from slave catchers. If you look at the history of policing, it was birthed from slave catchers. So in the 21st century policing, there's no way we should still be stuck in the same concepts and terminology and really the same system from back then in the 21st century in policing. And so what we're trying to do now is reimagine public safety. And what I'm particularly doing is shifting from protest to policy change. And my name is Kerwin Pittman. I really appreciate you all for having me. It's an honor speaking with you.
Right, Kerwin, you made your case. I had a board member over on our C4 side, and what he would say is it is very, very important that we now take it from the streets to the suites. So,
right.
Amen, amen. All right, now our next speaker, Mr. Tony Burnett. He is president of the Northampton branch of the NAACP and the director of the 11th district. His life has been characterized by public service. He's been in the military. He was a sailor in the United States Navy. He has been a police officer in Northampton County. When Tony got out of the Navy, he graduated from basic law enforcement training at Halifax Community College. He was a law enforcement officer for 25 years, and he's worked in Virginia and also I guess he did some training in Virginia, and then he's worked in Northampton County. He rose to the rank of chief of police in Seabird and Ridge Square, and he was also commander of the Northampton County Sheriff's Anti-Drug Task Force. Now, he has gone from law enforcement to being an environmental justice champion. One of his most significant leadership efforts as the local NAACP president was fighting the coal ash and natural gas pipelines in North Carolina's northeastern counties. So, Tony Burnett, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, so very much. And I'd like to welcome everyone that is listening, everyone. And it seems like we got people from all over America on this call tonight. And I'm thrilled to listen to Kerwin just speak his truth to power. Young man, continue to push, continue to do your thing. You are changing lives here in North Carolina. So continue to push, Kerwin, continue to push. I like that. I like that. I think Andrea said it the most. My name is Tony Burnett, and I hail from Enfield, North Carolina, from a place called Black Bottom. And as a little boy growing up in Black Bottom, so you can imagine if the name of it is Black Bottom, you can imagine the people that inhabit Black Bottom that are all black. I walk to school each and every day from where I lived, and those mean streets that I live on, you had to fight on those streets every day going to school. But my mom and grandmother made sure that I got an education. And as I was coming up in high school, I did a ride along with the Enfield Police Department. It always intrigued me. I looked at policing at that time, respectable. I saw those gentlemen, those officers riding those cars, and I said, you know what, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to commit my life to serving others. And from that point, I ended up going into the military, not going into law enforcement at that time, but ended up going into the United States Navy. And that service gave me an opportunity to meet so many people from all across America, people of all shades and colors. And it taught me how to work with others to make things happen. The camaraderie, the friendship, the relationships built for so many years. And I'm still friends with those men and women to this day. and they served this country well. And I was exiting the military. I thought back to policing, and I called the chief there in my hometown in Enfield, and he said, "Tony, we'd love to have you. When you get out, we're going to send you to the academy." So that's what I did. In 1984, February, I exited the Navy, and I went straight into the law enforcement academy at Halifax, and I graduated, and I went to work in my hometown. And I was recruited by the Northampton County Sheriff Office at that point. And I've been in law enforcement ever since. I'm still a part-time officer now. My wife is a law enforcement officer with 30 years of service, over 30 years right now. And my son is the police chief in one of the neighboring towns from where we live at. So a household full of police officers in my house. And my baby boy said he didn't want to be a cop. So he said, I don't want that. So he's doing his thing. And my daughter's one school teacher and the other one is in telecommunication. So I learned so much over the years in law enforcement, and I can absolutely sit here and tell you now there's no greater conflict within me that I watched this George Floyd case, and I'm following that case now along with every other American in this country. And I say that when that officer put his knee on George Floyd's neck, that he put his knee on every black man in America's neck in this country. And people rallied all across this nation about police reform. And I'm a police officer, and I can absolutely sit here and tell you that, yes, we need police reform. Yes, I'm a lifetime law enforcement officer, but at the same time, when I pull that uniform off, I'm a black man. And if a blue light gets behind me, guess what? My heart still skips a beat if a blue light gets behind me. And if that blue light pulls me over, guess where my hand goes? My hand goes out the window. That's a problem. That's a problem. We have a fundamental problem in this nation around policing. And I've seen it each and every day. And you think about what's going on in America, you would think that some of the men and women that see this happening, that they would say, you know what? That can't be me. But it continues to happen day in and day out. Now, I wasn't trained to put my knee on somebody's neck. I wasn't trained to arrest a 6-year-old. Negative. Never had to shoot anybody. Never. My number one weapon has always been my wits and being able to talk to people and being able to de-escalate the situation and to be able to build those relationships on the street. And Kerwin hit it on the head where he said that officers are now in America, that a lot of the calls that officers go on is dealing with mental health issues. And not one officer has been trained to deal with mental health. So I put that on my list of recommendations, that in every in-service training and at every law enforcement academy, those officers should be going through some type of mental health training on how to deal with mental health issues, because mental health is on a rise here in America now in this day and time. We have suicide at an all-time high rate in this country like it's never been before. We have a lot of good officers out here, y'all. No one hates a bad officer no more than a good officer. You got people who have put their life on the line to serve and protect. But I submit to you that we can do better, that we must do better. You have a lot of those lobbyists, those police unions, that really makes it hard to change the laws in this country. But I submit to you all that's on this call tonight that if we can band together around social issues, if we can band together around environmental issues, that we can band together around criminal health, criminal justice issues. And this one fight that we must not give up. This is one fight that we must see through, all of us as a collected people working together, and we must not stop. We must not stop. We must continue to work. I've seen this criminal justice system chew up people and spit them out. Young black men, once they get in the system, it's so hard to get out because it's like a revolving door. I want to share this conversation I had with a young black man. I was in the projects, we call them here in my neck of the woods, and we was doing a voter registration drive. And it was a young man on the porch. He had his baby in his lap. And I went to him. It was several of us from the NAACP, and we asked him about registering to vote. And he said, well, sir, I just got out of jail. He said, I got out of jail from selling dope. He said, I don't have any job prospects. Everybody I go to try to hire me don't want to give me a job because I got a criminal record. So what do you expect me to do? I can't vote. You can't get me registered. So what type of hope do I have? And the young man was right. He said, I can't even go and get on food stamps. He said, so what do you expect me to do? How can I feed my baby? He said, so, sir, you know what, Mr. NAACP president, I'm going to have to go back to slinging dope in order to make ends meet. And that rocked me to my core, hearing that young man say that. And seeing that revolving door, once you get caught up in that criminal justice system and it goes around a vicious circle. Here was my remedy to that, and I want you guys to hear me on it. We created a program here in Northampton County called Operation Restore Hope. And what that Operation Restore Hope did, and what we're still working with it to do now, we called together our judges, our attorneys, and our clerk of superior court, and we asked those folks would they sit in on this Operation Restore Hope. And what that was helping these young people get their criminal records expunged so they could get good jobs. And I tell you that people turned out, and they turned out in groves, because they saw for once that the criminal justice system working on their behalf for once. So it's things that the criminal justice system can do and must do in order to show people that yes, we enforce laws, but at the same time, yes, we help people. That's what we are here. That's why we are here to serve. And that resonated to the counties next to ours. And the NAACP president in that county started having Operation Restore Hope over there, giving young people, old people, the hope to say that it isn't over, that together we can turn this thing around. I had an opportunity to sit on the Halifax Northampton Reentry Council, helping people when they're getting out of jail to get jobs. That was one thing that we found it very hard to do, and to try to break that vicious cycle. How can we get those people back to work? And we talked to the different companies in our area about employing people with criminal records. And we put pressure on them. And they decided to give those guys an opportunity. But we can do more. We can do more. Here's some recommendations that I have for the criminal justice system. In-service training, and I go to in-service training every year, and I'm telling you, we have nothing to touch on race. Nothing. And I'm constantly asking instructors each year, when are we going to talk about race in criminal justice and law enforcement? When are we going to talk about that? We talk about juvenile sensitivity, but we never talk about race. We talk about implicit biases. We just started talking about implicit biases in our in-service training. Those are the type of issues that should be on the forefront when it comes to law enforcement, to criminal justice issues. Those issues right there should be on the forefront. Community policing. Back in the early 90s, when I ended up here in Northampton County, I had to live where I worked. When the sheriff brought me into this county, he said, Tony, we need you to live in the community in which you work. And I moved to a place called Garysburg, North Carolina. and that's where I worked. And the people in that community knew me, and I knew the people in that community. You know why? Because I was vested in that community. I lived there. Those people knew me. They saw me each day in and out of uniform. I went to their church. I became a member of that church. So guess what, people? Those people trusted in me. If you all just think back right now, you have so many crimes that's going unsolved. Why is that? Because people are not having that. People are getting away from having the trust in law enforcement. The regular person on the street solves the crime. Somebody picks up the telephone and calls it in and say, officer, you know, I witnessed this. I want to come forward. And that helps solve the case. But when people are afraid to come forward because they're afraid of law enforcement, you have a total breakdown. So I say to you that we must have our officers living in the community in which they serve. Case in point, in St. Louis, you had the Brown case there where he was shot there in St. Louis, and they found out that those officers policing that town, they lived in the suburbs. They came into that town to police, and they went back out. So how did the citizens in that town, how did they build a relationship with those officers? They didn't. And I think Kerwin hit on that, where he said that policing, that militarism in the policing, and it's easy to get caught up in that, us against them. And it can't be an us against them. It must be that our community. It must be building relationships in our communities. It must be. It must be. It must be about service. I say to you that we must make it strenuous for someone coming into law enforcement. We need to make sure that they are being vetted thoroughly, that we don't let any bad seeds put a badge on them on their chest, that we don't let a racist put a badge on his chest. We must make it harder. We must. Right now, it's so easy to come in law enforcement where those checks are not done. We must know this person's background before we give him a gun or a badge and give him the authority to go out and kill, to shoot somebody. So we must put those in place. I say to you, if we can band together, if we can be coalesced, if we can band together and we can stop a pipeline, millions and billions of dollars, I say to you this day, we can band together today for criminal justice reform. But I say to you as well that we need our officers. If I pick up that phone right now and I dial 911, I want an officer to come to my house. But at the same time, when that officer comes to my house, I don't need him killing me either. I need him to respect me as a citizen of this country and of this state. And I want to tell you guys something, that I look at law enforcement, I am a servant, that I serve you. And I tell all young police officers, men and women, that the citizens don't serve you, you serve the citizens. You are a public servant. You swore an oath to uphold the laws of this great state of North Carolina and to its citizens, that you swore that oath and that you owe the citizens that. They do not serve you. The first word out of your mouth should be sir, and the last word out of your mouth should be sir, ma'am. It's just that simple. It don't get any simplified than that. And I feel that a lot of officers has gotten away from that, that they feel that they are above the citizens, and it can't be that way. It cannot be that way. I've been stopped as a police officer. The officer didn't know I was a police officer and didn't tell me why he stopped me. Told me I would look suspicious. And I had a problem with that, but I didn't battle with him on the side of the road. No, because you don't win on the side of the road. I battled with him in front of his chief. I battled with him, holding him accountable, because I told his chief, if he stopped me that way, how many other citizens have he done that same way? And it's so crucial. It's so crucial that the interactions that officers make with people, I call them deposits or withdrawals. I love making deposits. I love making deposits. I hate withdrawals. Deposits will give you dividends. It's called respect. In order to receive it, you must first give it. So these different, what I'm telling you guys now on the issues that we can definitely work on, mental health issues that we put that in the officers training on how to deal with mental health. And I'm coming to a close, but I want to share with you on this call, and I've been on several calls dealing with mental health patients, and they was really scary calls because I had no training dealing with those mental health patients. I went to this one gentleman's house. He was off his medication. And when I drove up to that gentleman's house, he had knocked out every window in his home. Every window in his home, he had knocked the window out. And he broke out the screen door while I was there. How do you handle that situation, ladies and gentlemen? We tried to talk him out. We finally got his sisters and his family members to come up there. And after we stayed there for about 2 hours, urging him, coaching him on, he finally came out where we was able to take him into custody at that time, but we didn't arrest him. We did what we call a commitment order on him, sending him to the hospital to be evaluated, and they come to find out he was off his medication. I say this, we didn't have to kill him, and we didn't. That what you see that's going on in America right now, I don't know about what those folks are doing. I say to you, they wasn't trained that way. And we must hold them accountable, because every time you see an officer getting something being found not guilty on an officer, it hurts the Black community, because where's the justice? Where's the justice? The George Floyd case right now, I'm telling you, that case is being watched all over America. And people are still saying right now, will those people find him not guilty? It shouldn't be a question of this man's guilt. Everybody in America saw it. So why should we be second guessing on what the jury is thinking about? But we do. That seed is already planted. We've seen it so many times. But I'd like to thank you all for listening to me tonight. I really do thank the host and everyone for inviting me to speak. God bless you, and God bless your families.
And thank you so very, very much, Tony. I'm going to sort of move into gallery view. I'm going to have a question for both of you. I'm going to go off camera. We don't need to see me. Anna, I'm going to stop your video because I want to constantly.
Andrea, your voice broke out. I can't hear you.
We are going to need to talk about some other things. One member of my team, remember, I live in the country and my internet is about to go out. So Tony and Kerwin, you will get questions from me. That might be in the chat. I think my connection may drop at any moment.
Maybe Anya could.
Anna, would you like to?
Nancy or Suzanne, there we are.
Yeah, maybe we could have Anna pick up for the question and answer. Anna, do you have some questions you want to put to Tony and Kerwin?
Sure. It's one particular thing that really stands out, and for both of you, and it would be this. One of the things that we're seeing specifically with George Floyd was the no rendering of aid. So I find it very, very disheartening that a police officer goes into training through BLET and is highly trained when it comes to their curriculum. And in fact, one of the largest segment in the curriculum is about rendering aid, EMS. Yet, why do we as citizens have to demand that if that's part of their training? Because I know Corwin brought that up, and I know with all the law enforcement training you've had, Tony, that you know that that's one of the largest segments that police officers are trained to do during their basic law enforcement training. So why in the world would we have to demand that they render aid when that's part of their training?
And you know what, Anna, it is. They have what you call a Good Samaritan law out there that covers officer that renders aid. I look at that circumstances dealing with Mr. Floyd there, and I see those officers standing around, nobody doing anything. I find that to be just outright disgraceful, distasteful, and everything else. I'm at a loss for words, Anna. I can say this to you all, that I've been on several scenes since I've been in law enforcement, helping to deliver a baby. Given mouth-to-mouth resuscitation over 5 or 6 times, being able to save someone's life. I mean, being to jump in there to stop bleeding, you name it, and I've done it. When it comes to helping a citizen from gunshot wounds to stab wounds, being able to put on a battle dressing out there. So a lot of this stuff we're seeing, I submit to you, it's going to be peer pressure on some of these people to act like some of these bad actors are acting and not doing what they was trained to do. To me, hold those people accountable. We shouldn't have to demand that officers render aid when that's in the training.
Exactly.
I mean, it's already there. You have laws that protect officers and citizens for rendering aid. So I don't understand that. I can't fathom that. I can't grasp it.
It is in my honest opinion that a lot of these departments and law enforcement agencies have a culture within their department to where racial biases is baked into the culture of that department. So regardless of their training, the culture of the department is, in majority of these departments across the country, is really to devalue the Black life, to be honest with you, and to be frank with you. And so what we seen was a devaluing not of just George Floyd's life as a human being, but the devaluing of a Black man's life, in my honest opinion. So regardless of the training of what somebody teach, if the culture within this department is particularly baked and ingrained in racial biases, then we'll continue to see individuals not render aid or pick and choose who they render aid to, and how they deal with everyday citizens. That is exactly what we're seeing across the country right now. That's why you see 2 forms of 2 justice systems, because the culture within the justice system as a whole, not only just police department, when it comes to district attorneys, when it comes to the magistrate, when it comes to sentencing structure, when it comes to the laws, it is the culture that the racial biases is baked in, and that's why you see the night and day. And that's why George Floyd was brutally murdered and no aid was rendered to him, while other officers stood by while Mr. Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck. So it is the culture versus training that is baked into these different departments.
Kerwin, what about, can you tell us about recidivism?
Yeah, recidivism. So recidivism is the rate in which an individual goes back to the criminal justice system, prison or jail once released. We know it is a lot of factors and racial biases that is baked into that kind of fuels the recidivism rate, and some of those being in as Mr. Burnett spoke when an individual comes home already saddled with a felony on their record, it's hard for them to find a job. It's hard for them to get different type of benefits for government assistance. Why? Because if you're selling drugs, guess what? You can't get different governmental assistance. And one of the recommendations for the task force, and not to go back to that, is for these individuals to be able to get governmental assistance if they have a drug conviction on their record, because the main 3 things the individual need upon release and the main essentials of life is food, shelter, and clothing. So what are these 3 things propagated on? It's propagated on money, economy, right? And so my main thing is if we address the social ills of these communities, which 9 times out of 10 is lack of funding, is lack of economics, then we can address the social ills. So it's like when you call the law enforcement in, that's after something has happened. That's after the social ill has really take place and bake and blossom, right? You call law enforcement in. So let's address the social ill so we don't even have to call law enforcement in. And how I see it is simple. It's simple mathematics. When you get sick, right? When you catch a cold, you're going to take something to get rid of the cold. Granted, now you might have something to address the symptoms. You're not just going to take something for the sore throat, but not take nothing to really get rid of the cold. You're going to take something to get rid of the cold. And so the social ills is the cold. And when we call law enforcement in, that's the symptom. That's the throat being sore. So we really just focusing on the throat being sore, the symptoms, instead of addressing the social ills of these communities, which is really economic deprived, in all honesty. So we got to really reimagine the social structure here in America of how we see things and how we do things, to kind of reimagine public safety, to reimagine the recidivism rate, and so forth and so on.
Well, we were so pleased to have both Tony and Kerwin with us, and we look forward to a lot of great things coming out of all the programs that you are implementing. And we thank you for your service to our community, Tony, as well. Because Andrea does not have good internet, it knocked her out. I'll turn it over to Susan for any other further announcements and the next series that would follow this. So thank you all for joining us. It was a pleasure for us being here with you.
I will just reiterate that this was a very powerful presentation tonight. We appreciate the time that you gave us. We learned so much and everybody is asking for more information. We're going to share with you that chat so you can see what was going in there while you were speaking. You've fired everybody up and you gave us great recommendations on how we can act. And that's the most important thing. So Tony and Kerwin, thank you so much. And everybody else, stay tuned. We're going to have more wonderful webinars in the future. It's going to be hard to beat this one, but we will have more. So everybody, thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Same to you guys. Nice meeting everybody. Kerwin, we got to talk.
Okay, we're going to talk.
Okay, Kerr. God bless you guys.
Bless.
Good night and thank you.
Thank you.